Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. In today's episode, we'll explore how strategy isn't just a plan on paper, but a living journey. We'll talk about why leaders need to anticipate shifting landscapes, how to let go of the past in order to face the future, and what it takes to navigate both business and family wealth with resilience and clarity. My guest today has built her career at the intersection of change management, private equity, and wealth strategy. From her early work in South Africa during the transformational leadership of Nelson Mandela, to advising entrepreneurs on scaling and then preserving wealth, she's seen firsthand how bold vision, scenario planning, and mindful decision-making can shape outcomes. With that, let's welcome Jacoline Loewen to the show. Jacoline, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Michael, it's an honor to be invited to have a conversation with you. I'm really looking forward to hearing what we're going to explore together.
Likewise. I really enjoyed my time getting to know you. And you know, you've something that really struck me when we were chatting about your experience is how you see strategy as less about the destination and more about the journey. And so from your experience, I know you've written a few books about this and you've been, very interested in the subject. Why is it so important for leaders to see strategy this way?
I think, so I'm in the finance world. And, we're in a world of numbers, science, and exact answers, and strategy is not that. And I think it's a bit of a conundrum or a challenge for leaders. And what I have noticed is the leaders who set themselves apart really do know that it's the quest for the Holy Grail. It's, so on one day you might have a list of clothes that you might require, with the terrain that you're going to travel, what you're going to spend your time doing. But the next day you might just have to jump up and go. If you've had some time to talk with your team and to practice ideas and to talk about it's reflecting on pain, like the past pain. Let's reflect on that. And then from that, you get progress. So really for strategy, it's progress that you're looking for, not the exact answer, because quite frankly, the answer is going to change. I mean, if you had done strategy really well last year and you've got the plan and suddenly tariffs get dumped on you, you better be able to pivot. And then that past strategy plan's out the window. So I find it is definitely a mindset that's quite different from being in the finance part of the business. It's really about exploring bigger challenges, things that, the other thing is in finance, we have quite a lot of introverts, and you find with introverts that they do like to procrastinate a bit. So strategy also forces you to go forward, get asked those questions, go to places that you don't really want to go to. But I think too, for me, like in Canada, the weather here is quite incredible. And I have to say, some of my favorite experiences are get out into that snowstorm. You have your coats on and you struggle through the snowstorm, and you do get to the other end. Like usually it's a nice ski chalet with hot chocolate, or there is a reward for it. So that's really how I look at it.
There was a metaphor that you shared that that there was some really like resonant elements there around strategy planning, and it was the one of comparing strategy planning and as traveling from Cape Town to the Arctic, right? Where leaders have to adapt to entirely different terrains along the way, and I think about, like, even right now, this is a period of time in Q4, where we take a lot of time and start thinking about what are the questions that we need to answer. Okay, how can we answer those questions? And based on those answers, well, how can that inform the strategy that we're going to set for the next year on a very high level and aligning it to the mission of the organization? And what's really interesting is now, after, doing this for 15 years of every year planning the next year, it's very much a journey. Like, we go through twists and turns, and especially now, it seems like we're on Formula One cars rather than before. Maybe, it was on a ship that would take some time to get from one place to the other, and the winds would change. But now we're on these electric Formula One cars that are just zipping through destinations, and things are changing so quickly, and the places that we go to help us get to the next step in that journey towards that holy grail, like you shared, it could be completely different. And we need to adapt to it. So I'm interested, what do you mean by this metaphor of sort of, comparing strategy to traveling from Cape Town to the Arctic?
I think you're right. The vehicles are much faster. Everything's coming into the world a lot quicker. I mean, I think from the Industrial Revolution to now we're into AI world, that it's 1,000 times higher impact. And so you have to have a mindset that's going to accept change and accept like big change, and be able to accept that you're not going to be perfect. I like to be perfect, but you're not going to. So let's take a look at that metaphor. I've always loved this for strategy. You need that big North Star. So when you're starting out with the North Star, so maybe you're going to travel from Cape Town to Vancouver. That's something Canadians can imagine. And this was a lot of fun in Africa. People love to do these big, great treks or trips. And so, you think about it. If you're coming out of Africa, you have no idea of the weather. Nothing prepares you for being in cold weather. But when you're starting off on your trip, you're in your minimalist vehicle. Perhaps you've got a caravan. You can determine that more. But really, you're bringing your equipment that you need to go across the Kalahari, the Sahara, travel up across Africa. That's hot. That's so, and you're going to run out of gas. I mean, there's so many other elements. There's danger. You want to be prepared for all of that. And if you've done some planning beforehand, I mean, a lot of people do just jump into a jalopy and go, young men, but they do make it. But you want to do it in some comfort, right? You want to be able to do the whole journey. So once you get up to Siberia, and there's a little crossing that closes up over the middle of winter, so you can actually drive across from Russia to Alaska. So I'm told. So it's got a very short period of time to make that. So you're going to have to switch from everything hot to everything freezing, from your clothes to how you're eating, where are you going to get your food, and the whole time you're doing it, this is stressful. You're not going home and having an easy time. This is high stress that you have chosen, but you've got that North Star. You know where your destination is, and you keep going because of it. And then you make a plan. Your car breaks down. Maybe we try a whole different vehicle. oh, but I don't like that kind of vehicle. But you know what? This vehicle's got snow tires. Get in there. So you're now adapting fast. You're making changes that perhaps you don't like, you're not comfortable with. I remember when I immigrated to Canada, I had to change. And so I don't like wearing jeans, and I had to wear jeans because Canada's jeans country, right? So, and it's the same with strategy. It's you go think about that North Star, build up that image of where is it you're going. You're not quite sure, but you have a rough destination. You've got your compass with you. I feel my analogies are old fashioned now, Michael, with GPS and all of that. But it's like, let's take a look at clothing, for example. It has changed so much, like warm clothing, the tech for it, and perhaps you're not going to feel comfortable wearing this brand new technology for clothing, and not believing it's going to keep you warm, but it does. And I think that's part of it, is you are going to have to jettison everything from your past as you move to the future. And I remember Peter Drucker, one of my favorite authors, he said that every 5 years he threw away everything. I mean, he must have archived it, but he took all his theories, frameworks, and restarted. And I have a lot of respect for that. And I think more and more we're going to be challenged to do that.
Preparing for the journey is something that comes, I think, from wisdom. And I think a lot of wisdom traditions, that was a central teaching opportunity. In Australia, going on a walkabout, for example, and in South America, there are these healing journeys that involve, journeys into rainforests and psychedelics and all these other different experiences to prepare an individual to understand how to adapt, and the fact that, when we're out in the world, that there's so much that's changing and so much that we need to keep our eyes open for. And I think it's just so wise to think about that metaphor around, what is a journey actually look like? And I think you really spell it out there, right? If we're going from Cape Town to Vancouver, for example, that there are massive different terrains. There's changes in weather. It's not a straight line, and I think that we can fall into an illusion that when we set a strategy, that there's some really straight line to get to an end destination. But that has not been my experience, right? It's one of my mentors, Michelle Chabon, at the University of Toronto. She shares that, life unfolds rhizomatically, like a ginger root. It's sort of emerging and moving towards, the sun, as a ginger root would. But when we look towards this North Star that we set, it's not a straight line. It is rhizomatic. It's shifting and moving with and evolving to what's needed right now. And I think that's such a valuable reminder. And one other thing that was coming up in my mind is, like, not all, we may set a destination on a path and a journey to explore new worlds, new frontiers, and they may not end up, in that destination, right? And so I think there's something special to that, saying, yeah, we've set on that path. The journey was met with the reality that this is not the destination. We need to change. And if we take it with that approach, I think there's a lot more self-kindness and compassion that business owners and executives whom have, led organizations in certain directions. You've gone through the journey. You have that experience. It didn't end perhaps the way that you didn't meet the destination that you set out for. And then just realize that that's a reality, and how do you come to terms with that, from your experience and experience working with many other executives and leaders and business owners, and were they perhaps weren't met with the success that they anticipated?
Well, I am an eternal optimist. The glass is always half full for me. And I've realized that many people, the glass is half empty in their minds. And so I agree with you on putting in that work to develop a positive mindset, because guess what? You're going to get punched in the face today. Go to bed, have a good sleep, have a good cry if you want, but next day get up and make it happen. And you're going to get very surprised. But I think, someone like Ray Dalio, he's the founder of Bridgewater. He did a book, Principles. And I admire him so much because I was quite shocked by his opening chapter, because he talked about how he meditates every day, and he's been doing that his whole career. So in the morning at his desk, he would meditate, get his mind ready. And, Marcus Aurelius, also one of my favorite Stoics, talks about how your life is what your mind is. So I think as leaders, most leaders have that resilience. That's why they are leaders. The key is, to diminish the fear within their teams and to start to harness their inner joy, their inner excitement about that North Star. Like, what is your company doing? I mean, I know with my business, with wealth management, I know we are going to significantly change the lives of the people, our clients and their families. Just because we've seen best practices of wealthy families, who does it well, what are their frameworks that they use, what are their patterns that they follow, and then we can bring that to our newer clients so that they also get to benefit. But I think when you fail, what is failure anyway? I have failed so many times. And what is it Gretzky says, you've got to take all those shots on the net. And being a Leafs fan, the Leafs take a little bit too few shots on the net for my taste, but it is, again, that resilience. Now, can you imagine being a Leafs goalie and you've just let in the winning of the whole year, and if you've just let that goal in and that puck's flown by you, how does that goalie deal with it? And you'll see the team captain comes out and hugs them, and the team surrounds him. You take a look at how teams treat their goalies, and they all look after each other if they're a good team. And I think for leaders, good leaders, they're used to failure. They you have to try things. You have to get out there and try a new client segment, see if you can attract them into the business. And okay, after a year, perhaps, okay, we have 0 from that segment. Okay, we're shutting that down. But in the meantime, you've been learning, you've been growing. There's so much. It's that, and again, Ray Dalio has that philosophy of pain, but you must have reflection, and then you progress. And, in our business, we're in the business of money. It's pretty visible how we are doing. And if our strategies for where we're investing are working, that's very visible. And if we're getting challenges, the market's not going the way that is anticipated, it also shows up. But what I love is if you're able to, as a leader, get your team to talk about failures and go through your own failures, and you're still standing, 10 years later, it's a wonderful lesson for your team. They're going to feel, okay, not only is this interesting, this is my personal development. We all start with our own personal development, but with my outer circle, okay, I'm hearing from my team members. If I share, my stress because that share portfolio that I put together is not working out, I need to shift it. What's going to be the reaction? It's like that journey to the North Star. You are switching, turning, adjusting is never just from A to B. You're going to have different stopovers, or things will happen and you're going to have to adjust. And if you're with a team can you imagine being with a team that's, oh my gosh, why is this happening? You can't do that. You have to, go relax, take some time out, find things that strengthen you. Like, I love rocks. Hold a rock, touch some grass, as they say, find beauty in nature, and then come back, recover, come back, reflect, share your learnings, be transparent, be honest.
It's just very grounding, advice in how to traverse this landscape as an entrepreneur, or as a business leader, because that's been my experience too, where the community that you have, the teams that you have, the people that you surround yourself with are so important in creating the environment that can help you endure. But you in turn are an impact on them. So how you show up as a leader informs that environment, right? And it could be a very positive one, nurturing one, nourishing one, or it could be not. It could be a toxic one. And then also, I think this learning from other leaders too, and the patterns and the pathways that they've set, like with Ray Dalio principles, I for years I listened to that book on repeat, and so while working out, and it was just really interested. Yeah, just really interested to hear how he approached, building a business and really mapping out what worked for him, and it helped me inform what works for me. And then also surrounding myself with mentors and all of that. And then there's this inner game, I think that's really, really important too, is working on our own minds. I think to bring it to what that Marcus Aurelius said, our reality is, essentially comes from our state of mind. And I'm going to share a story. I actually trained a NHL goalie. So I trained the team that essentially is called the Toronto Marlies. So they're linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it was their championship winning team that they won for the American Hockey League. And it was funny what you said, that, how does a goalie manage letting in that game-winning goal? And there was a moment where we were working, I was brought in to work with the minds and train the minds of this hockey team. And there was an aha moment that the goalie had. Goes, it's clicking for me right now. I can see how a lot of the resistance I have towards things going a certain way brings me suffering, makes me suffer. And I said, okay, well, elaborate on that. What does that mean? He goes, when my team is chasing after some offensive player that's coming towards me and they trip him and they create a penalty, and now suddenly there's a penalty shot that's being brought on me, where there's that one player and they have it's just a free straightaway right towards me. Well, I can go and worry and be so pissed off at my team and keep thinking, why did they do this, and not be present for the game and what's at play. Or I can accept it, not resist it, and let myself be fully present for the game and what's happening right in front of me, this puck, that player, this moment. And my suffering goes down tremendously. And so I think, if we allow ourselves to be present and be informed by, like what you said, with all these learnings that we have, we can just be so much more skillful. And something I want to bring into you spoke about jettisoning the past, and how we have to do that along the way, and how Peter Drucker would sort of take his old models and approaches, and every 5 years go through a renewal process. So Dr. Ellen Langer from Harvard Business School, she says that mindlessness is using yesterday's solutions for today's problems. And that being mindful is by being fully present for what's needed right now and applying, the solutions that are needed right now that are emerging for this time. You know, from your perspective, how can leaders know when to let go of what worked before in order to navigate for what's ahead? Like how can they sort of think about that? And how have you seen yourself sort of even traversing this sense of, okay, wow, and now I need to sort of let this go so that I can now focus on what's needed right now.
Yeah, sometimes I mean, there's a lot of pain to let go, right? Like you usually have a lot of pain. And so maybe one of these little ceremonies of, having a little cut out doll of, I mentioned a client segment that didn't work out. You can burn that little effigy and have a little, farewell. I mean, I do remember at, I think it was the NASA. They actually buried. Remember, they switched their space program from the rocket style. They actually had a complete shift. They actually buried it. They had a burial ceremony and buried it, and then they went to the new space shuttle, I believe it was. So, you can. I think it's good to have those ceremonies, and I think you can do it alone. I always think it's better trying to share it with people from your team or perhaps your relationship, so that your key relationships, so they understand more of what you're going through. They understand this is not easy for you. This is not something that you just casually are doing. They're not just throwing some garbage down the chute or whatever. This is serious, and what you're letting go is serious. I do remember letting go of my BlackBerry and moving to iPhone. We all have experience. I think that's one lucky thing about our time. We've all gone through very large technology change, and we've adjusted at different pace levels and come to see, where we are. But I think, I mean, with entrepreneurs, what's very hard is when I was in the business of helping entrepreneurs get investors. And so they went from I always call it driving their own car, to now they had someone big in the car with them, and they could decide if they want to share that steering wheel or if they're going to keep steering by themselves. And had to fundamentally change the way that they were operating. Usually they'd start to have formalities like board meeting, a quarterly board meeting, and no longer having casual chit chats in the kitchen and making an idea and then let's go and let's just do it. Like having now to be a bit more formal about it. And I think that's you spoke about walkabouts at the beginning, and I think taking a team offsite is huge. I mean, you can do it at a restaurant. It doesn't have to be high cost. You can do it at a park. You can do something out of their usual habitat, and ask questions, pose questions of what are we leaving behind. But where are we going with this North Star that we're going? We're entering new terrain. We don't know. We don't know it. What could help us? And they're going to tell you. Your team is amazing. They will figure it out and help you if you ask them. I think a lot of leaders don't delegate. And my experience with entrepreneurs, I wrote a book, Money Magnet. And I found that the entrepreneurs who were not so successful in attracting money to invest into their businesses were typically the very, very smart guys. They were the engineers or the original designer of the company that can finance. They would be the investor creating the portfolios and I always said that they just had a little acorn in mind. They hadn't thought to scale up. And that's why, as an entrepreneur, it's really important to force yourself to constantly think, how would this company look at 3 times the revenues? What would it take? And, nowadays, I was going to say with 200 staff members, but, with the scaling up of technology, you can really scale up. So what would that look like? How would your best day look? And then come back and then start to build from that moment. But that's where I found with the entrepreneurs who just, their little acorn was for a little tree that they had, and they couldn't get out of the way. They, it's like a real estate, like you don't call in the real estate agent to come sell your house. You try to sell it yourself. It doesn't work. You need experts. You need to surround yourself. You need to bring in outsiders. And listen, for doing strategy, for selling your business, for selling your house, it's much better when you get an expert in who's going to push you into very uncomfortable places, which you have been procrastinating about and not wanting to go to. So it's much easier not to change.
It's bringing up a lot for me. I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, what am I not seeing? What do I need to let go of? What am I holding on to?
Michael, if you ask your team, they'll all have the answers for you.
Well, that's it. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And we do that. We have regular retrospectives, and I think it's just, it's very valuable, invaluable.
I'm a big fan of having frameworks, and there's a company, Strategic Coach, that many entrepreneurs, I used to send a lot of entrepreneurs to Strategic Coach, and they had frameworks that so they had a timetable for the week. So you had a very specific framework looking at, like, what are your 3 big projects to get done? What are the 10 little steps? But every week you were looking at that same framework. So it became quite familiar to you. And I'm a big fan of writing down by hand your big goals. I'll tell you why. I remember when I was in my 20s, I paid a lot of money to go to a seance with a psychic. And I went with all my girlfriends, and we were so excited by this. And, go in, and she's feeling my aura, and she thinks I'm Australian because I have this funny accent. And so the entire reading was about Australia. You're going to be, in the big boats sailing, and, all this stuff. And so I came home so disappointed, and I had the cassette tape. I couldn't even listen to the tape again. And I had spent a lot of money. And I thought, what did you do? And I got a book and a pen and paper. And I said, I wanted her to tell me I was going to live this amazing life. At 60, I would have this. At 55, I would be this. At 40, I'd be living like this. I'd be here. And then I thought, okay, well, map it out. So I did it page by page, decades. Each decade was a different page, what I wanted to be. And I wrote out all these things, which, I wanted to write a book at that point. I've written 3 books since, but, I wanted to do an MBA. I wanted to go into finance. I wanted to, all these different things. But at the time, I was just a little girl. I was a new immigrant to Canada. I'd heard on the grapevine that in Canada, as a woman, you can do anything. So I was being inspired by all of that. But, I still have that book, and I am now far beyond by the time I was 40, I was far beyond the entire book. But I write my goals every year. And I think there's so much value in just taking that old pen and paper, not even a computer, and just writing it and having a book that you have for the rest of your life. And really setting some really horrible, impossible goals that you're never going to meet. I have a lot of those still. And you have to let those go, and it's painful. And, 4 years later, I still feel pain because I didn't achieve those different things. But I've achieved very other different things that I hadn't put into my book, when I was writing out my notes. So I think, it's always discomfort. If you are comfortable and you're, I like to be in the deep end once a week. and thrown in and just go for it. And that's what you need to do with yourself, is put yourself in the deep end. Make a phone call, make a coffee with that, Jim Balsillie. I mean, you might not get Jim, but he's got a great innovators group. And you'd find that out. Oh, okay, I can go here. And then one day you will meet Jim. I love Jim. He gives wonderful talks about how he combines when he travels. He goes to visit a place of worship, and he goes to an art gallery just to make the visit resonate more and be more of a memory for himself. So
I think of writing things down in like a tactile way. I think this is why the people love the BlackBerry. I mean, I loved it. It's just that tactile sense. You got the buttons there. That was a painful thing to let go for those of us who remember.
Beautifully, yeah.
And then, it was sort of the bridge from pen and paper. I have my books, and I take the time to find a good quality book. I'm holding up a book right now to Jacoline. And then just a really nice, pens. Like I like tactile pens that have, that.
That's so ink nib.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, and then I just fill it up, but it allows me to just enjoy the process of writing, and I'll go on retreats, so that's something I'll do. I have roughly every 6 months a retreat where I go in and I allow my mind to become still. I engage in a lot of nature-based practices, a lot of sitting meditation practices in an inspiring nature-based area with really close mentors. And then we'll have these talks. We'll have these contemplative talks about where we're at, both in terms of our mind, but then looking into our family, and then looking into, strategy around the business and growth and the impact that we want to create. Because I think, a lot of our mission and impact is to help people really understand their minds, especially those in positions of influence. So leaders and helping professionals, like how can we support them in really learning about the mind and to optimize their potential. And it's been just such a great activity. I have a stack of books too that I'm keeping as well, and sort of moving through that. And it's a great little, sort of a chronology of your life that you can return to later on. And so, Jacoline, you've worked, with many leaders over the years. From you began your career in South Africa at a time of tremendous change, right? Working with leaders like Cyril Ramaphosa and major companies like South African breweries, which I learned recently is one of the largest breweries in the world.
Two brothers did that.
That started from two brothers, and what did?
Yeah, they were like about bottom of the heap of brewery sizes, and so of course when the change happened in South Africa, now it opened up the world, and Michael, you and I were talking about doing strategy with Canadians, and one of my frustrations with Canadians has been that you're sitting right next to the most beautiful market in the world. It's not being a decision almost, it just happens. I think as Canadians, we can be the little brother with the big brother and not put as much into strategy. That's really what I observed with many smaller entrepreneur companies. And yet when they do strategy, like in South Africa, the South African brewery guys, I was in the room when they were doing blue skying, and it was a retreat, as you were mentioning, and just saying, what would it take for us to be number one brewery in the world? And I do remember myself rolling my eyes, thinking, oh, that's crazy. I think if people say to you, that's crazy, then you've got a good idea, perhaps. But, each of the people that were on that retreat then went out into the world. They went to Brazil, they went to Europe, they went Romania, all over the world, Australia. And then they started buying up all these beer companies. And now I think they are the largest in the world. And that took, 25 years for them to achieve that. And these, the two brothers, I have to tell you, beautiful people, and really focus on values and looking after their employees, and understanding their employees, and having their leadership understand their employees. Like, it was very, for me, I always think of it as, I'm like let's get on with the work. What are we doing with this soft stuff, right? But I've come to see that actually what you were describing, taking time out, those slow times, writing your goals, your 3 goals for the year, your big North Star for the year with that beautiful flowing pen in a slow way. That's what is, those are the game changers. And that's what will help you be resilient when you get slammed sideways, when you're playing goalie or whatever on the ice. It's and I think too that when you have those times of reflection, they're very special, actually. Having a retreat or some time out, even if it's a lunch or an evening with your employees. And again, as the leader, you're being watched and you're being heard. However you are reacting is how you are going to be setting the tone throughout your company. And so with change, I mean, we had a saying, a favorite saying, because I did a lot of change management for Deloitte when I was in South Africa, as you can imagine. And my favorite saying was, "Hey, the train is leaving the station. Get on, let's go." And you go. And, once you get on the train, the platform, you're off the platform. Now you're moving to the next destination. Now you can start to resettle and reorganize.
We've covered so much here in terms of, on a very high level, on strategy, and then also very pragmatically how we can think about it in applying it in our own lives. And I think this is applicable to not only entrepreneurs, business leaders, but individuals too, in terms of, where do you want to go in your life? Even just learning from your experience, Jacoline, and how, I had a similar moment where I was coming back from a drive. I didn't have a way back. I was probably about 2 hours away at one university. There was an event happening there. And this older gentleman who was there offered to give me a ride back from this. It was like a networking event back to Toronto. And on the way, he just started asking me these questions. And he said, "You know what, let's do a little activity here. We've got a couple of hours. I'd like for you to envision how you see yourself in 10 years. What are you doing? What are you thinking? What do you see around you?" And it was wild that in exactly 10 years, I was in that exact arena that I visualized in front of hundreds of people, speaking and talking about what matters so much to me, which is these contemplative practices, mindfulness practices, a practice of awareness and compassion, and how they can benefit our lives, and it's so valuable. Now, one thing that we haven't discussed, but I would love to just maybe do a little exploration there. Entrepreneurs, business leaders, and those who are perhaps building wealth for themselves, there comes a point in all our lives where we shift to stewarding that which we've amassed. And so when you look at that transition to, stewarding the wealth that has been created, or, our nest egg, whatever that may be, and with families, what's sort of the most important aspects to think about in that transition?
This is a fabulous question. And I write a lot of articles about it, because it's entrepreneurs, they love their adrenaline, they love their excitement. If you go to wealth management, it is the complete opposite. Warren Buffett will tell you, money needs to be boring. And, for the fellows who've just, and women who've sold their companies, and suddenly they've suddenly got 5 million, 10 million, 30 million, which they've not really had. And they've really been pouring all their money into the company up until that point. It's really challenging, because you've lost everything. Now, you're no longer the top dog at the office. People aren't running up to you and asking you to do things. You might get phone calls from the local hospital to donate, because people find out that you've sold your business and made wealth. But I think the biggest thing is to, again, what we've talked about is, what's your destination now? Now it's like being that immigrant in a new country. You're in a very different land now. That means different people around you, because often people who were with you might not feel comfortable with your new wealth. How are you going to deal with your family and your children with your wealth? Are you going to talk to them about it, or are you going to lie, which many people do? I mean, that's their choice. But I think the biggest thing to do is to realize that making money is really fun, very exciting, very dynamic, and through the thick and thin of it. But managing the money, and then also, giving it away, thinking about what can you use this money for, or even investing into other entrepreneurs and helping them blaze their trail and playing a role that way. That's my favorite way, by the way, for entrepreneurs, is give a little bit back to the guys coming up behind you. But I think it is an enormous challenge. And I remember this one jam entrepreneur sold his jam company for fortune and became severely depressed. And what happens is people around you can't believe that you're depressed, because how can you be depressed? You've got all this money, buddy. Like, come on. But you've lost your former identity, your life, your relationships. The people at the company, they're moving on with the new owner. You're just not part of it anymore. So it is, again, reinventing yourself, and beyond golf and, chicken club sandwich. That gets boring very fast. So I think for entrepreneurs, though, is the other challenge I would say to them is, and I see this frequently, pay yourself first. Every month, pay yourself first. Because if you are not saving, even, for an ETF, a lovely, gold ETFs are very popular right now. If you're doing that and you're gaining, but you've got your debt, obviously, but you start to see your wealth building. It'll build a lot quicker than you anticipate. And, to get you up to that 1 mil point, because that puts you into a wealth management category. And then to realize that other people do this as a living all their lives. They are much better at it than you are. And your emotions are going to take over. And that's what a wealth management firm does, is saves you from your emotions. Because, being an entrepreneur, it's like, whoa, that's something shiny, the next squirrel, like, let's run after that. And also you're going back to your golf club or wherever your friends, your mentors are hanging out, and you're trying to tell them, oh yeah, I just invested into this great little tech company, AI company at Waterloo. Before long, you've given away a lot of your money, and you have gifted it to those entrepreneurs, because so many of them actually don't make it. It can be more of a lottery ticket at that point, right? So I think, wealth is, people chase money, and entrepreneurs, they'll chase their money. Get your number. What's the number for it that you'll stop? Just write that number down, and that you'll walk away with. Just put that down. Write it down on paper that you've got it. Because, the one thing with entrepreneurs, it's always like, when are you going to sell? Well, in 5 years. And then you see them 5 years later. When are you going to sell? Oh, in 5 years. And then you see them at 65 and they've got health issues, and their family, the company goes under because they haven't prepped for it. And I think that's also, we think it's going to go on forever, and it doesn't. And, I spend a lot of time with billionaires. I'll be having a big lunch with, 5 billionaires, 10 billionaires around the table talking to each other, or multimillionaires like this. You're talking a lot of wealth. And they always get onto this topic of, wow, it was so much fun making the money, and stewarding the wealth is not as much fun. It's a lot harder. And are you going to bring in your next generation of kids who, a lot of these billionaires, their kids are bald. they're older. How are you going to transfer wealth to them? How are you going to do it as a family? Will you do it as a family? What's the value of doing it as a family, as a bigger group? And so I think if you start to look at what other people have done ahead of you and start to learn that, it's going to help. All I have to say is I have to warn you, though, as an entrepreneur, if you've sold your company, you're suddenly getting wealth, do not go buy an airplane and start taking airplane lessons, because too many people, they've ended their lives too early because, again, that skill set of a pilot, they've got 100 points, they've got that checklist, and they're sitting in the one seat, they're checking everything in detail. Think of an entrepreneur. Are you going to be doing that? No. And someone's telling you can't fly because the weather's 70% there's a storm. Entrepreneurs, you're going to go. That's how entrepreneurs are.
Maybe a sailboat instead.
Yes, that's probably, although I have to say, so many people say the happiest day is when they buy that sailboat, and then the second happiest day is when they sell it. So,
well, I guess that's that thing, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. I think there's a lot of wisdom in there. And I think the biggest thing that stands out for me is that we need to prepare to change our relationship with money, and also our relationship, and really find ways to understand the relationship that we have with ourselves. I read recently an article on the addiction of success, and how the praise and the success, the pursuit of success, can become as addictive as addictive drugs can be. And when that's gone, you hear about astronauts who their lives fall apart afterwards, Olympic athletes whose lives fall apart after they've attained the pinnacle. And I think it's no different as well for those business leaders and those who are able to accumulate wealth. And also, I mean, those with that, maybe it's not massive amounts of wealth, but thinking about, wow, this is a transition now. This is a new phase of my life. How am I going to approach that? And how can I do that skillfully? It's so incredibly valuable. So thank you so much for sharing that, Jacoline. And thank you for sharing your journey, and the insights about strategy, about, strategy planning, and the work of business, and as being a journey rather than a destination. But we need to be informed by the destination that where we want to go, and be ready to adapt and to move and to pivot, and then how to do that skillfully along the way. I think there's so much that we can take from this, and I know that our listeners will value, gain a lot of valuable insights from this. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and what interesting comments you had as well. I really valued that. So thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you to our audience, you, our listeners, for tuning in to Leading Minds Revealed. I look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.